There's a town that I call home, where the streets are paved with soul. Down on Beale there's a honky-tonk bar. Hear the wail of a blues guitar. Share a smile, drop a dime in a blind man's jar. Blues sing softly everywhere, like a Sunday morning prayer. Just one more song and you'll see God everywhere. Like a sad old melody, tears you up but sets you free. That's how Memphis lives in me. There comes a time when muddy waters run rough. There comes a point when a girl has had enough. Like a friend who always stands by me, yeah. Memphis knows me, Memphis shows me how this life just has to be. I couldn't even try to run away and say goodbye. Here I was born and here is where I'll die. I'm just a girl from Tennessee. Can't be what I can't be. All I know is Memphis lives in me. There comes a time when muddy waters run rough. There comes a point when a girl has had enough. Like a friend who always stands by me, yeah. Memphis knows me, Memphis shows me how this life just has to be. I couldn't even try to run away and say goodbye. Here I was born and here is where I'll die. Just a girl from Tennessee. Can't be what I can't be. All I know is Memphis lives. All I know is Memphis gives. All I know is Memphis lives in me.
When my parents named me at birth, few people shared my first name, and even fewer knew its origin, even into my teens. When people called me Mike or Michael, the way that I helped them pronounce it correctly was saying Micah, as in Formica. It was that way for many years until a memorable encounter at age 28, when I was dropping off a roll of film following the birth of our first child. The 20-something woman behind the counter at Walgreens asked my name for the order. Micah, I said, M-I. Before I could say C, this friendly woman who happened to be African American said, I know how to spell your name. Because Micah asked and answered what God expects of us, to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. I was floored that this random woman, who I learned was attending community college in Memphis, knew the prophet Micah in this week's prophetic Haftorah portion, accompanying the double Torah portion this Shabbat of Chukat Balak. My chance meeting at Walgreens was over 28 years ago. Just 3 years ago, Micah became the acronym for the Memphis Interfaith Coalition for Action and Hope, an organization of over 60 other organizations, churches, synagogues, mosques, and other noble causes like Facing History, MIFA, the National Civil Rights Museum, Stand for Children. This Micah, me, stood up around age 1, not knowing where life would take me. 2 days ago, on July 1st, 2020, it's hard to believe that I completed my 29th year as a Temple Israel rabbi, and it hit me as I reread the prophet Micah in this week's Torah and Haftorah portion. As I sat down to write tonight's sermon, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, came to my mind. He contended that of our three modes of time, the past is the most certain, because the past is most sure and unassailable. The future is completely uncertain, and the present is in flux. But the past has happened as it has happened. So what we learn from the mistakes of the past, what we leave behind and take from it, is of critical importance, especially on this eve of America's 244th birthday. Micah the prophet is the Haftorah reading for the Torah portion, Balak, this week, the name of the Moabite king Balak, who hires a well-known non-Jewish prophet, Balaam, to curse the people of Israel. However, Balaam ends up, instead of cursing the people of Israel, he ends up blessing them 3 times every time he's supposed to curse them, including with familiar words with which we open morning services, recalling the pagan prophet this week's utterance upon seeing the Jewish people's tents, their houses, and looking over the children of Israel. He's supposed to curse them, but out of his mouth comes, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, how good are your tents, O Jacob, your homes, O Israel. Now, some of the early rabbis view this guy, Balaam, as a dangerous sorcerer, but other great rabbinic commentators, many, view Balaam as a person whose faith grows and whose understanding deepens of what is good and right. And seen this way, Balaam, who was sent to utter bad things, evolves. He changes with experience after getting closer to the people and the notion of one God. He even offers a 4th prophecy, not about the Jewish nation, but about the nations beyond the Jewish people, thereby reminding us then and certainly right now that no nation is an island. The action of one country always impacts other nations. We breathe the same air. We are endowed with the same equal image of God. And I know some of you may be looking at your TV in the background, those 2 COVID boxes on the television screens listing not just the national case count and death numbers, but the global. That's Balaam's 4th prophecy. Since only the past is certain, each of us individually and together collectively has the power to form the future, no matter how fluid, fluctuating, in flux the present may be. That is why I asked Ella to sing the moving song, Memphis Lives in Me, because in this city paved with soul, a city which I and many of you never expected to move to and nobody planned to be born into, in this city mentioned in the Bible by the Hebrew prophet Jeremiah, on this eve of July 4th, Ma tovu, how good that God has placed us in this remarkable 200-year-old American city named Memphis, which is filled with the pain, the promise, and potential of what the prophet Micah meant when he distilled the purpose of the Jewish faith in those 6 words the Walgreens woman recited to me. Do justly, love mercy, love goodness, and walk humbly. God is called in the Bible a mighty ruler who loves justice and equity, and we are in a city where it is hard to escape that pursuit of justice and equity. The way, we all can when we flee the city to getaways at the beach or the mountains or anywhere away from people or only with the people we want to be with on a vacation. Memphis, in case you didn't know, has both the third poorest zip code in America per capita, yet it is also the most philanthropic and generous city per capita in the entire nation. 47% of Memphis children, mostly black, live in poverty every day. Yet it is the everyday Memphian of lower means and not the more privileged and largely white Memphians who got us that number one statistic per capita in America for generosity. It is the everyday Memphian of lower means who gives back no matter what his or her income, the economically disadvantaged churchgoer who gives charity at a much higher percentage of income than members of predominantly white churches or synagogues. In this city where the streets are paved with soul, with both pain and injustice and glory, everyday Memphians are giving back with their resources and their lives, even this weekend with community service, social distancing, but giving back. Because for too many in our city and in America, there are no holiday weekends. My point is that even in a disproportionately poor majority African American city, Memphis proves that doing justly and walking humbly doesn't have to do with how much you have. It has to do with how much you give and how much you are willing to sacrifice for others. Hebrew prophets like Micah also remind us that God is less concerned with ritual and your personal spiritual search, and that God is far more concerned with the blights of society we are commanded not to ignore. From the vantage point of the prophets who were invoked by the founders and framers of America, a society that does not alleviate the anguish and suffering of others is a contradiction in terms. So that's what it means to do justly. What about loving chesed, often translated in English Bibles as mercy? It's also loving kindness or goodness. What's this good religion the Hebrew prophet Micah addresses and the pagan prophet Balaam blesses? Good religion enlarges God's world. Bad religion constricts God's world. Good religion teaches people to love one another with humility rather than to think foolishly that we are the King of Kings. That's why Judaism has always been ambivalent about monarchies and rulers throughout our people's history. Walking humbly in Memphis, in the spirit of this week's Torah lesson, means acknowledging individually, as a city and as a nation, that we are all works in progress, and that looking back, religious people must also learn from the fatal mistake of using religion to dominate or destroy, even justifying slavery, segregation, and systemic racism, holding up a Bible. We're hopefully continuing to learn and resolve through actions like the removal of the Confederate emblem from the Mississippi state flag this week, that we can build a better tomorrow, no matter what our collective past has been, and no matter what our path to the one God we just sang in the Shema, the one God who loves us all. I want to give you one more image before I close. It's from the great theologian F. Forrester Church, who uses this wonderful metaphor for understanding all these different faiths and peoples who inhabit our nation and our world. We all live in the cathedral of the world, he says, a cathedral with many different and beautiful stained glass windows. Each of us is born into one window, one part of that cathedral, and our families show us how the light shines through the window of our own faith window, our own heritage. And the light outside emanates from the same source with a capital S, God, even though each window interprets it differently. The windows are the stories of the many different paths to God. Of course, how we view this cathedral of the world depends upon where one stands. A relativist says all the windows are basically the same, so it doesn't matter where you stand. An elitist faith preaches the light shines only through my window, and a fanatic would break all the windows except his own. But a lover of the cathedral realizes that this nation and world are better because of our differences, not in spite of them. The light that shines through our Jewish window, which both Balaam this week caught a glimpse of and the prophet Micah defines, is the light of Torah, whose sacred obligations link us to all humans and to God through mitzvot. Harmony is Judaism's goal and America's goal in the cathedral of the world. Harmony, not conformity. God must love diversity. Just look at how different we are, not just in Israel, but in America. Jog through Overton Park or Shelby Farms Park. Take a stroll through the Memphis Zoo. Open your eyes anew to the people in your extended family and tell me how much God must cherish our differences. Look how different everything in the world and everyone is. Even within the Jewish family, we are one people, but with many different faces. On this July 4th, Balak and prophet Micah Shabbat, if only we emulated God's example more by celebrating our differences, not just tolerating them, which brings me back to Ella's song, Memphis Lives in Me. Here in Memphis, our mosques are beautiful. The Hindu temple is magnificent. The Catholic cathedral is breathtaking. The Greek Orthodox Church, legendary. The Latino community, marvelous. And even Memphis's relatively small Jewish community includes this anomaly of a large, thriving, and vibrant synagogue in the Deep South. Memphis, unlike larger cities that are too big for a citywide sense of community, Memphis, which is different and messy and intentionally about the issues Micah and the Torah is talking about, rather than the wonderful vacation places I also love, but which were intentionally created as escapes. Memphis, as much as any other city I know, is a living reminder that unless we learn how to get involved and help one another, we will only hurt each other. You can't get away in Memphis with just believing in lifting up the poor. Memphis lives in you when you realize that redemption will only come when we live the words we pray and create synergies relationally across all ages, creeds, colors, in addressing racism, public education, access to health care, safety for all Memphians. In closing, as I told a dear friend and Memphis faith leader in our meeting earlier today, different are the languages of our prayers and the color of our skin, but the COVID cries are the same, and the tears of pain and isolation and fear and bewilderment are all the same. Religion's task in general, and Judaism's mission in particular, is to cultivate a sensitivity for other people's suffering and join together with God and everyone we can as co-partners in healing this shattered world. Kain Yehi Ratzon. So may it be for you and everyone in Memphis, in America, and the world. And let us all say, Amen.